Every leader has bad days. Most pretend they don't. This is the show where leaders stop pretending and start learning. Welcome to the Bad Days Leadership Podcast, where leaders pull back the curtain on decisions they cringe about, rooms they misread, and the failures that shaped everything after. Real leaders, real mistakes, real lessons. Because you can't become a great leader without a few bad days. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Bad Days Leadership Podcast. This is the show where we absolutely learn from those days that do not go in our social media feeds, those moments that we regret, those stories we still cringe about, and we are just glad that you are here. I am Dr. Matt Paden, your host, and I am so thrilled to have with us today Dr. Henry Cloud. Dr. Cloud is one of my all-time favorite leadership and organizational thinkers. He is one of the best speakers I've ever heard, and just so grateful for him being here today. He has written over 45 different books, including such legendary books as Boundaries and my personal favorite, Necessary Endings. If you're listening to this show and you know me, you have probably heard me reference Necessary Endings. This is such an honor to have him with us today. He is the New York Times bestselling author of over 45 different books. He's spent decades coaching CEOs, executive teams, and organizations on performance, culture, and leadership effectiveness. Dr. Cloud, it is an honor. Welcome to the Bad Days Leadership Podcast.
Good to be here, man. We don't have to have a bad day here. Let's have
We
some
don't have
fun.
to. We don't have to. In fact, we're gonna do our best not to. I am just so thrilled to have you here today. I know that you have traveled the road with many, many different leaders over the years. I've read the stories in your books. You've got a new book coming out. We'll talk about that just came out that we'll talk about here in just a moment. But I suspect you've got some really good stories because I've read so many of your good stories in your many wonderful books, and so I'm looking forward to this conversation. Let's just jump in, if you don't mind. You have been someone who has walked alongside leaders, but also have led organizations yourself. You have a long history of being a leader of your own business. You had a larger business practice that you had back many years ago. As you think about leadership and you think about those moments that maybe that taught you the best lessons, I suspect some of those were some of the bad decisions. Are there any leadership decisions that when you think about it, like, oh, what was I thinking? That you still kind of cringe about, that you still look back on and go, oh man, I can't believe I messed that up. And maybe what are the lessons that you learned on the other side?
Well, I'd almost put it this way. If things are working, we're not learning anything. Because they're working, we're doing what we know, and what we know is the way it works. We really almost, this isn't quite true, but we almost only learn when things go bad. Because obviously there's a gap in the way we're doing it and the way that's required for it to work. And so there's your learning gap. And one of the biggest hurdles with leaders is, by definition, they're high performers, and high performers love to win, you know, love to do well. How you metabolize when you don't do well is the big difference. Because if you can approach not doing well in a way that your brain can actually use it and turn it into learning and good stuff, then the problems are the best gift you ever have. But if you metabolize it in a different way, you're toast, and you will repeat it or worse.
So good. It's so good. Any examples from your own career that you those lessons learned?
Well, we only have, limited
Few
time.
minutes, huh?
Um, yeah, I could give a million. I started, I had been in practice for a handful of years, but I've got a business chip in me. It came from a family. And so I had a vision to start, this was back when you could actually have psych units in hospitals, because insurance would allow, long enough to actually treat somebody. And I had a mission to do a faith-based, psych hospital. and that was my vision. And so, long story short, went out and did one, and I wanted to have control of it. Here's a funny story. I was in my 20s, and I thought I need to have control of it so I can design all the programs and all that kind of stuff. And the best way to have control of it is to own the hospital. So I said, well, I'll go buy a hospital. And I didn't have two dimes to put together. I mean, I was broke. But everybody says you need money to make money. No, you don't. You need money, but then it'd be your money. So I went out and raised the money to buy a hospital. And so we couldn't get a deal to go through. They were too profitable at the time. So we morphed the model, which is another thing. Failure, right? No. You learn and you that's an obstacle. So we morphed the model and I approached a med surge hospital and talked them into giving me one of their wings, converting it to psych. So anyway, we did one. And what happened was that worked, but what I didn't know at that time was, and this is part of, I talk about this a lot in the new book, is that leaders tend to do things in their own image. In other words, we'll hop into something in the way that we're wired and the way that we know. And so I built a a psych hospital company as 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 a doctor model, which means, people call and you set them up with an appointment and you treat them and this, that, and the other. Well, we were doing a radio show and somebody invited this friend to go to dinner with us. So he's listening to the show. And afterwards, he he says, "This is y'all got really got something good going here. Um, where's your call center?" And I said, "What's a call center?" Well, this guy had run a large national chain of treatment centers and had retired. He was about early 50s at the time. I was a child. I said, "What's a call center?" And he said, "Well, that's where, I mean, you're generating so much and all this. Somebody's got to take these calls and get them into treatment." I go, "How do you do that?" Anyway, so he started looking at our entire operation and he said, you have no idea what you have here." I said, "I guess not. I mean, we're doing what we know to do." Well, I asked him to do an audit of everything we were doing, and he comes back, and I said, "Well, what do we need?" And he laughed. He said, "You need somebody like me." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Y'all know treatment. You really don't know healthcare operations.
Mm,
You need somebody like that." Well, the point, he came on to join us. He didn't want to. He had retired, but he loved the vision. He came on to join us. Ultimately, we ended up in 45 markets in the Western United States, had treatment centers, California, Nevada, Oregon, Washington State. I didn't know that you really do need other gifts that you don't have. And, the way that God has designed the universe, you're not going anywhere by yourself. And until we realize that what we're doing could be different, bigger, better, or not failing, probably not because of some way that we're failing, but because of some ability or knowledge base that we don't possess. And that's why one of the most important lessons you can learn is to ask the question, what talent do I need around me in the company, outside of the company, whatever? What talent do I need around me to make this work? Because we'll grind it out. We're fixers, we do it. Each climb the hill. We can do this. But you're a closed system. So that was one of the big ones.
that's great. I appreciate the story and the context for our listeners about your that part of your life. A lot of people know you from your books and your speeches and all the things in the last couple of decades, but that first part of your career, you probably learned so many lessons. I'd love for us to stay there for just a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think about the trend. I
And
think about
train wreck lessons too.
yeah. Oh, I'm as a founder of a startup 2 years in, I'm resonating with what you just described. Is that you have to have the gifts and talents of other people. That's how this thing works. It's the only way these things fly, right? I'd love for us to stay maybe back a few years in your career. You have worked with leaders for a long time. Uh, what are some things that early on you thought helped make great leaders better, or made leadership great? You know, what are some of those things that you maybe you used to teach, and now you look back on, you're like, I had that wrong. Is there anything that maybe you've changed your mind about as it relates to not just leadership, but life as a leader? Anything that you've changed your mind on over the course of your career that early on, your early clients would have heard you say this, and now you're pointing people in a different direction? Anything like that
Yeah,
strike you?
well, the thing that strikes me the most is, and people a lot of times say, if you went back and look at all the books or anything you'd erase and say differently. I tend to try to look at things in the created order of how things are designed to work and the principles that really make things work. And I always say I don't really know of anything I believed in any of those that I don't believe anymore. But I would say this, that what I've learned is that there are a lot of different emphases that I would emphasize more. And so, if there's something I would do, emphasize differently in I think in the beginning, I kind of thought that it was really all about brains and talents and abilities, which it is. I mean, you got to have enough brains to do whatever you're doing or talent and ability. What what I didn't know in the beginning was most of it is the personal makeup of the person. And so a much bigger emphasis, not to negate all the other stuff. There's technical knowledge that you have to do as a leader. But what I learned very early on that I didn't know was that, everybody's got a problem as a leader, as an entrepreneur, as a business person. You're good at something. Finance, marketing, you know, whatever, IT, whatever you're good at, and you go to work, and then because you're good at it, you get better at it, and now you're leading teams or, departments or people, and now you have 2 jobs. One of them you're not trained for, and leadership is a second discipline in addition to finance and marketing, where you gotta learn that discipline just like you learned this. So I thought, the science of leadership and all that was very, very important. I did my doctoral dissertation in leadership personality. I was really into it. But then you get into this place called reality, and people learn all that leadership stuff. And then they go into the real world and they find out they're the ones that have to do it. And that's when the personal issues become paramount. Because take something as simple as casting vision. But what if you got to go cast a vision to investors or to a board or even to your employees? And you get up there and a little voice in your head says, well, why are they going to believe me? I mean, and you start to have this self doubt and all these, so that changes your brain. It changes the performance. It changes everything. Or you have a difficult employee, or you have an investor that's controlling, and you're afraid and you obsess about it. All of this stuff, personal makeup, it's it's so important. So I've always tried to hang out in the middle space of the technical aspects of leadership and how the context of leadership pulls at our personal and interpersonal issues that keep us from succeeding.
I love that. That just fits so perfectly in light with the conversation we have around our new book, The Core, where we talk about leadership is not so much about leadership that actually makes a difference. It's not just about the skills and the attributes that you bring to the table. It's about who you are. And it's about who you are from the inside out, and that's the core, is the essential uh, piece of the puzzle here. Is like, this is the stuff that's going to help get you across the finish line. We work a lot with people who have made the jump from being on the team to leading a team. That is such a huge jump from being the sales superstar to the sales leader.
Yeah.
those are 2 different jobs, and they require 2 different sets of skills, and people struggle with that.
Yeah.
And
And I
so I
and
I really appreciate what you just said.
well,
That's fantastic.
and and to emphasize what we're talking about, 2 different sets of skills, but also this new set of skills is going to pull at different parts of you. And and let's say if you're in sales, you're I mean, classic. You've got to engage somebody, you got to build trust, you got to bring them along, you got to keep things moving. You're taking something right from here to there, and you're on this linear path. As a sales manager, you're not flying a plane anymore. You're in the air traffic control tower, and you got to make sure all of this is working. That's going to pull at very different aspects of issues and conflicts, abilities, all of that. And those get in the way or help us succeed. So you're right. It's skills, but it's personhood. And we have to have both. And the great person who has a great core, I love that analogy because who somebody is, that core is going to work its way out into what lies on top of that is the software, the code of the tasks itself, right? So the leadership stuff you got to do. Well, somebody can have a great core, but if they don't have the software of vision and execution and strategy and accountability and measurement and all of the things that leadership requires, that great core is going to be a wonderfully nice person that fails. But if you have all the software and you know everything about leadership and you are a you know what underneath that, or you're conflict avoidant, or you have fear, or you interpret failure as I'm a loser, whatever that core is about, or you're self centered or egocentric, that core is going to corrupt the best software in the world. So it's always both. I wrote a book called Integrity because you ask people about integrity and they go, "Well, yeah, yeah. Does he have integrity? Yeah, he never lied." No, that's not integrity is not just moral integrity. That's the foundation. It's not just lie, cheating, and stealing. Integrity, that word means integrated. An integer is a whole number. Integrity is a person that can fire on all the cylinders of what a performing human has to be. So you got to have both.
Yeah. I love integrity, by the way. I didn't mention that earlier. That's another one of my favorites, the courage to meet the demands of reality.
Yeah.
We talk about embracing truth, searching for, finding it, and then doing something about it. A lot of that is based on that idea that you have to have the courage to meet the demands of this reality. And that is so critically important. Let's shift gears a little bit.
And where are
So,
you gonna get that if you don't have it? I mean, and everybody thinks, I I've done a spent a lot of time in the Navy SEALs. My brother-in-law was a SEAL, and we lost him in Iraq. But these guys, I mean, they're just incredible. And I'll never forget one of the things that they told me. They said, "No one ever rises to a challenge. You fall to your level of training." It's like you can send me to the gym and tell me to bench press 400 pounds and say, rise to the challenge, get more courage. Well, it's not there. So a lot of people are trying to grind it, but it's like a car that's out of gas, tell it to put some self gas in it. It's not there. And so that's where the personal development side of this has to get outside of this closed circle of who you are. And that's why coaches and leader and mentors and people that help and all this. To change entropy in a closed system, you have to open up the system to two things: new energy and new intelligence to organize that energy. So whatever we don't have, it's gainable if we open up the system to becoming better. And that means, we got to learn some new stuff and get some courage put into us. Why does the Bible say encourage, put courage into each other? And now everything the brain science is telling us or showing us what we should have known all along, if you were watching, was that there is real, real power that comes from the unity and the connection that people have with others. And you have to pick those well.
So good. Such a great example. Let's shift gears just a bit. So you have worked with countless leaders in countless different types of organizations. You've seen probably a lot of things that I don't know. I have this picture in my head. You tell me if it's right or wrong. I have this picture in my head of you being called in to help in some really significant moments when a leader or leadership team is about to crash and take down a company. I think I've heard you speak about examples of those. When you think about some of those examples of those hardest moments, those things that have definitely been the result of some bad days and some bad leadership along the way, when you think about some of those lessons, what are some of those stories that just stick with you, that just when you think back, that one happened 20 years ago, but I still think about that example and the lessons learned? Because what I really want us to think about is what are the red flags that people need to be hearing, right? So what are some of those examples and those stories or so that you've learned over the years that you've seen and witnessed and you're like, "Oh man, everybody needs to hear from about this on this subject. Watch for that red flag."
What I mean, there's a handful of these that are very, very important. But one of the biggest red flags happens a lot of times not with the leader who kind of wrecks it all, but the people around the leader who were not listening to their gut and minimizing what they saw. And because of the power of that person or the results that that person was getting or whatever, they really weren't entering into that space when they would see these little things along the way. And that happens with boards, it happens with teams. And, I'm a person of faith, and I always think, God gave us these ways because what do you say in Deuteronomy 6? So that we might always prosper. That's what Moses said, follow these ways. Well, one of them that's really powerful, you look in Leviticus 19 and it says, do not pervert justice. Now we talk about justice, that's doing things the right way, right? Do not, and it says, do not kind of give in to the poor or needy. In other words, if somebody's, well, they're hurting, really want hold them responsible, and we kind of let people off the hook because they've got some problems or whatever. We still need to require requirements and people to get better. But then it says, or defer to the great and powerful, for you will rebuke your neighbor frankly. In other words, whether they're above me or peers or below me in whatever structure, that if we don't, if we're looking at something that's not okay, we've got to address that. And one of the big red flags, another one of my favorite verses is Hebrews 5. It says, solid food, which leadership is solid food, is for the mature who, through experience, have had their senses trained to discern good from evil. One of the big red flags is when you've got a leader that everybody kind of serves at that leader's pleasure, including the board. That's a problem. That if we're not building teams and boards and organizations that have the kind of trust, which is the number one thing, and what now is called psychological safety, which means basically you can tell the truth without getting your head cut off. If we're not building that, you've got an organization or a business without an immune system. You would never go into the world to the grocery store without an immune system because there's infection all the time. Well, that's what a good organization does is when there's an infection, we say we do what the immune system does. The saliva attacks it and fixes it. If it gets past the saliva, the stomach actually gets it. We got strong. If it gets past that, the marker cells go out and name it. Literally in your immune system, if you've got a bacteria that's infecting you, they put a sign on it with the genetic code of that disease so everybody else can see it, and then the T cells come and contain it. If that were happening in every organization and people had the trust and the skills and the abilities to talk to each other, that didn't go well. Well, tell me how, and take feedback and all that. You wouldn't see these big train wrecks. So that's one of the first things you got to develop is a team, a board, a partner, whoever you're doing this with, that you can tell each other the truth and it can be received and learned from. How about that? Kind
Yeah.
of simple. We teach it to 3-year-olds.
Yeah, that's right. That's
But you
right.
got a lot of talented, gifted leaders who have a lot of charisma, a lot of performance, this, that, and the other. And people just kind of look the other way sometimes. And it might be relational. Who knows? That's
I
all.
think that I think there's so much value in what you just described. You're talking about the difference between a team and a working group. And you bring people together and you say we're going to collaborate on this project. That's one thing. You bring them together as a leadership team. I think there's so much damage done in organizations by leadership teams. I'm using air quotes here because they don't often share the truth. They don't necessarily always say what needs to be said.
Yeah.
Uh, it's just such a fascinating piece of the puzzle in life and organization where these people who are put into these roles don't play the role they've been put there to play.
It, it, I mean, but the thing is, you can't ask somebody to play a role in bad soil. If the soil that you've built in the culture is not the soil where trees that can be honest and face their issues can grow, then it's not going to grow. So we got to work on that piece first. And I give you a great example. I put this example in the book in the chapter on accountability. I think um, in I think it was 2004, there were almost 400 fatalities in commercial air travel in the US. And the FAA and everybody said, this is one is too many, but this is 400. We got to solve this. So what they did was they formed a group with the pilots unions, the mechanics unions, the equipment manufacturers, the FAA, and the air traffic controllers, whoever basically touches this, talking about groups versus teams, this shared goal of keeping planes in the air, right, and landing them safely. Whoever touches that in some way, they formed a group and they made a covenant. We're going to, when we find a mistake in our neck of the woods, we're going to bring it to the group. Biblical word here, confess it to the group. And here's the promise: nobody's going to get fired. Nobody's going to jail. You don't have to worry about it. I mean, unless you shoot somebody or put a bomb on a plane or something. But we're going to bring our mistakes and our failures to the group. They started to do that. Pilot Pilots people come in and say, we had a near miss last week that was really close. Well, what happened? Well, the pilot was, he was changing the switch down here on the console, looked up and he had lost visuals. So the air the airplane builder, whoever the company was, said, well, we can move that switch up here. Problem solved. Okay, now roll the clock forward. After I think it was 12 years, 10 or 12 years, these numbers may not be right. Something like 20 billion takeoffs and landings or pass. There's a 20 billion number in that 12 years, zero fatalities. They drove it down to nothing. And then a window blew out on a plane and then they had one. But you go read about the story. I put it in my book, but that's what we're talking about. Smart people can solve problems if character doesn't prevent it from happening.
Love that. I'm going to ask you a question. This isn't on my sheet. It just hit me when you were saying this. Two times in the last 2 weeks, I've had business owners reach out about different challenges potentially. I kind of zeroed in like on this topic or this idea of vulnerability. there is apparently, some mixed emotions as it relates to whether a leader should show vulnerability to his or her team or not. From your perspective, is there a place for vulnerability in leadership?
Well, if you look at the real meaning of vulnerability, it means I place myself in your hands in some degree, to some degree, that I may be hurt. Okay. So, by definition, let's get at the highest levels of this. By definition, a board is being very vulnerable when they hire a CEO. They're placing themselves at great risk and trust with this person. When a, when a leader has a team, their success, their boss is not going to come to them about somebody else's performance. Their boss is going to come to them about the results that they got to get through these people. So to think that we don't have vulnerability, that's that's ridiculous. We're all vulnerable. The question becomes, and the kind of vulnerability that you're talking about, the question becomes in the service of what? Okay. So then you get down to the actual constructs of what am I placing in the hands of these people that I can be helped or I can be hurt. So if we're talking about, you go back to the last one, you're talking about I made a mistake. You can really be helped by being vulnerable. Hey guys, I screwed up. I need help here. Let's figure out where this went wrong. That's just good performance. That's what Tiger Woods does with a golf coach. I hit it out of bounds. What did I do? That's vulnerability. Now, there are other times when a leader may be going through something, maybe it's personal or whatever it is, and they've got to ask themselves, am I going to be vulnerable about this? If I am, in the service of what? Are they really going to be able to help me? Or does it do them a disservice to know about this particular issue? And so, yes, we must be vulnerable. It takes wisdom and judgment to know with whom and for what purpose. The all the research ever about leadership shows that people will follow leaders that have number one, power, not dominating, aggressive, but power, the power of expertise. When you have authority, that means you're an authority in this, that you do something so well, it brings value, people will follow that, right? You're the goat. They're going to listen to what you say. But that power also, they tend to follow leaders that, by and large, the emotional valence towards others is warm because people have got to lean in. If they're following you because of only fear, that's an anti performance driver biochemically and in every other way. You'll get compliance, but you won't get the best. So there's got to be some sort of warmth. But the third one is they follow imperfect but winning leaders because if somebody has shown performance and they show you their failures and they show you the issues, they're imperfect and they own those, then the other people get the message, oh, I can do that too. I can learn from that. He screwed up. Wow. Really? You did? Well, that takes you down a whole different road to where you move towards how did you learn? How did you overcome that? And this and the other. So it's really, really important to begin, to do that. And the other thing is that people, the fourth big category, this came from a lot of social learning research way back, is that they follow people that are like them in some way, that we can identify with them. When we when we that's why you see when people are running profits, they show them with their kids and their family. I got all the same problems and issues that you do. That's and there's you got to make a distinction between vulnerability and transparency.
Right.
And a lot of times people don't make that distinction.
Yeah.
I
No,
mean,
I appreciate that.
if you're if you're struggling in some way that you really need a good therapist or this, that, and the other, your team may not be the place to process the depression you're going through. If it's affecting them in some way and they're seeing it, then in the service of helping them get to reality and saying, dudes, you know what? Y'all know, I just lost somebody. My dad died, or we're going through this. I'm going through some stuff right now. I'm dealing with it and I'm getting some help with it. If it's getting, if any of my dealing with that stuff gets in the way of what you're needing from me, then let's talk about that because I want to help you and I want to serve you well. So that's the vulnerability of naming what they're already seeing anyway, but you're not asking them to be your support group or your healer. And it's a judgment call. That's why we need wise people around us saying, "Yeah, I wouldn't tell them that." Yeah, I'd probably let them know.
Yeah,
Their
that's
judgment call.
good.
I
That's
love
good.
the phrase "in the service of what." Why are you telling them this? Yeah, it's good reason. Oh, no, that's not too smart.
That's good. I wanna ask one more question, and then I wanna give you some time to talk about the new book a little bit more specifically. This question is a common question we ask on this show, and I've just always enjoyed, the
Here,
responses.
I got to tell you one big failure of mine where I learned a
Let's
lot.
do it. Yeah.
I won't go through the whole story, but I had sold the company. I had kept a division of it to start a new company. I was doing a bunch of other stuff. I put somebody in charge of it. At the end of the first year, I found out they had been giving me just lying to me about the numbers. Okay. Get to the end of the year, he comes in and does a capital call. Basically, I need an infusion. The numbers he had been giving me, he was going to be writing me a disbursement check. And all of a sudden, and I get in there and really look under the hood. It was a mess. He had told me that all of this business that was booked for the next year and the revenue models and all of that that we were depending on, tons of overhead, none of that was in place. And I mean, it was bad. So I go home that night and I'm sitting there. I'm feeling like the biggest idiot. Why did I not look more closely at this? What was going on? Why did I trust him that much? You stood up, blah, 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 blah. I'm an idiot. I'm so stupid. Why did I? So right in that moment, the phone rings and it's my mentor, my number one mentor in adult life, in business. And he had built big empires and all, I mean, just he was a superstar. And so he calls me and I go, "Oh no, he's the last person I want to talk to right now because he's going to ask me how's it going, and I can't lie to him." He asked me, I said, "Well, not so good, Toby." He said, "What's going on?" I told him the story, and I told him how bad the bleeding was. I mean, you got where are we going to how help? And I was feeling like an idiot. And then so I told him the story. I'll never forget this. And I finished, and there was silence on the phone. And I'm waiting for, "You did after all I what in the world were you?" I'm waiting for that. I mean, I'm bracing myself. And here come these words. He says, "Well, we've all been there." I said, "What?" He said, "Oh, we've all made that mistake." I said, "We? Like you?" He said, "Oh yeah, anybody who's ever built anything has made that mistake. You hired the wrong guy and you weren't looking at it and you didn't vet him and now you're in trouble." He said, "But here's the thing, after you do it once, you'll never do it again." But something changed in me that night. I still can feel where I was sitting. Something changed. And that next day, I didn't have a new plan. I didn't have new financing, but I was going to go fix this. And I did. And it wouldn't have happened without that phone call and his vulnerability. So, what's it in the service of? He was helping me.
That's so good. Appreciate you sharing that story. It goes maybe You may have just answered this last question, but I want to ask it just to see if there's something else that I'd love to pick your brain on. I love asking people, what would you tell somebody who's new to leadership about failure?
Um, well, the first question is, or the first thing I think you have to do is you have to sit and look at it. Why did this happen? And you have to have some other eyes looking at it as well. If a surgeon nicks an artery and there's blood going everywhere, he's got everybody looking to try to find that, right? Or she does. And you gotta so and just please put your defensiveness and your excuses and your externalizations of, well, it's because of the market or it's because of this. Stop it. You are ridiculously in charge and you've got to own this problem. So, first of all, we got to say, I'm going to own this. Even if it was because somebody, like my example, the guy wasn't performing. That's what, yeah, but he's my guy. I didn't have systems or me in place where that couldn't happen. So the first thing you got to do is you got to sit and really own it. And then you've got to look at, how did I contribute to this? And what do I need to change? And you might find, now here's what happens when you really look at it. And um, I mean, this is in the measurement and accountability section of the new book, which goes to, you have to fix what you find, right? But one of the most important reasons to have good measurement and accountability is you might find in your failure exactly what you thought. I did everything perfectly. We did everything. We executed perfectly and it failed. Well, like Peter Drucker said a long time ago, there's nothing worse than perfectly executing the wrong things. And so people will fail and they'll drive harder and never take the step backwards and go, we're executing perfectly some strategy that's not going to work. And so you've you've always got to, failure is what happens to get you across the room walking in a straight line. When you start to walk, your brain, you are going to drift off a degree or two. That's a failure. You didn't keep your heading. That's a failure. Your brain quickly measures it, holds you accountable, and you learn, oh, I need to make a 2-degree shift if I'm gonna not run into the wall. You learn from it. And if you do that, you're going to get there. So failure is your teacher. It's built into everything we do. When you chew and you hit your jaw, you quickly, your measurement accountability tells you, oh, and you start. But if you ignore it and don't do a root cause analysis, you will chew your jaw off. And that's what people don't do. They don't do the postmortems. They don't do on all my hospital units, if we had what's called critical incident reports. When something happens that's not good, it shouldn't happen. And and we would have a regular cadence where, just like the FAA did, regular cadence, we bring all of those to our committee. We figure out, what could we have done differently? How can we keep this from ever happening again? And it might be, the wrong dosage was given or didn't follow up on stuff happens. It's not malpractice, it's maloccurrences. But we learn. It's a bit failure, you know, NBA player misses it. Well, next time figures out, oh, it's further away than I thought it was. That's failure. And you learn, and this time you win the three-pointer, that or you make the three-pointer, then win. It's not bad. You can make it bad, and you can ignore it and things will get bad, but it can teach you.
I love that. In my life, you helped normalize endings, and just what you just said about failure has absolutely a lot of potential to help a lot of folks. So I want us to take just a minute here as we begin to wrap up. New book. Uh, this is I got it just 3 days ago. I read as much as I could over the weekend, and here we are. So I haven't finished it, in all honesty, but I am really a fan again of your work here. The five essential steps that take you where you want to go, your desired future. Tell us a little bit about this book and why this book now, and uh, just whatever you want to say about the book.
Well, probably, like most of my books, I'd say all of them. People say, how long does it take you to write a book? I go, I don't write books, really. The work writes the books. I mean, I'm a practitioner. I'm not an author. I spend 80 to 100 days a year in the war rooms with leaders and companies. And what happens is I begin to see things that explain what's going on. And I look for a book that addresses that. If I don't find one, I go, I need a tool to be able to, to give to people. And one of the things I continued to see over and over was, high performers love leadership and they love to study and they read all this great stuff. But there's a massive world of all these topics. And you study execution and strategy and change management, engaging talent, and all this kind of stuff. But I'd go into a team and say, y'all are leading this company, and I ask them a question. I'll give you 2 minutes. Write down your answer on the 3x5 card to an executive team of a global entity. And I'd ask the question. So, what is leadership? Y'all are the leaders. What is leadership? What are you trying to do here? And I'd get 7 different answers, and they were all right. But wouldn't it be good if the leaders were doing the same thing to get this company from here to there, their desired future? And so I started doing a factor analysis of why do things work and what in all this leadership stuff, or how do they group together, and what are the essentials to move something from here to there that are universal. So I like to look for universal laws. Everybody changes in context. And if you take Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, very similar paths in a lot of ways. The styles and the way they did it was different, but each one of these five essentials were there. And where they are missing, something's not going to work. And so that's what I tried to do, was showing the book how anytime anything moves from here to there, the way that your brain is designed, there are these five pieces that must be there. Now, here's the problem: none of us are good at all five. So we will go about things in the way that we're naturally wired, and we'll miss a couple of them because of how we're wired. That's where we need to get above it and say, okay, I'm not particularly good at this and I'm not having that. And so, but I need to put it in the mix somewhere. You don't have to do it. You just got to make sure your endeavor has these five elements, because if they don't, if something's going to go wrong.
Yeah. Dr. Henry Cloud has been our guest today. Thank you so much. You have no idea how much an honor it is just to listen and be able to have a conversation with you. Thank you for your wisdom, your candor, your honesty. Thank you for the years of not just being an author, but a provider of great tools for people to put in their toolkits, and just so incredibly thankful for you having the time, putting the time in today to be with us. And just if you want to learn more about Dr. Cloud's work, check out his books. The new book is fantastic, and his leadership resources at drcloud.com. Uh, Thank you again for being here. To everyone listening, as Dr. Cloud mentioned today, your bad days, those moments that fail you, they do not have to define you. They can be the starting points for new learnings and new lessons and new thoughts on leadership. They can refine you, they do not define you. And so we are grateful for that. Thanks for listening today to Bad Days Leadership. If this episode or any of the others have resonated with you, please download it, like it, share it, review it, and subscribe it, all the things. We will see you again next time on Bad Days Leadership.